Cliff. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We're being televised, so I think we're going on right now. I do have, let me introduce everybody again just quickly. On the far end here is our guest for today, who's going to be our speaker, Bob Collins, John Colby, and one of the members of the committee, and our newest member, and let me just give a quick introduction to him right now. He is just joining us. He comes from a survey background. He's worked in the District of Columbia in surveying and real estate, and has been involved in a number of organizations, and I believe you're still practicing
Yes.
survey here in town.
Well, in DC.
Oh, in DC, okay, okay.
But I
And-
live in town full-time.
Okay. Here, when you speak, close down.
And his name is Matt Kirk.
Matt Kirk. I didn't say that. I apologize if I didn't say that. On my right, Mark Bauernhuber, one of our committee members, and Bruce Fry, another committee member, and of course now one of our important ones with the 4th of July parade coming up shortly. He's the chairman.
Yes.
And on the far right, our town manager, Cliff Gravier. So, first of all, approval of the agenda.
So
Do
moved.
I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
And those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, also, approval of the minutes from our March 20th, 23 meeting. A motion, please?
So moved.
Second? Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, I'm just, we have a speaker today, Bob Collins, who is the Programs and Facilities Manager for the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. It's a pleasure to have him in town, and actually, he's a resident of Bethany.
I am a resident, yes.
That's wonderful. So, and also working on several shorelines, living shorelines.
Yep.
And are you the manager over at the James Farm, or
I'm the property manager of the James Farm as well.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
highly involved with James Farm? So I'm going to turn the meeting over to him here quickly so he can do a little presentation on living shorelines.
All right.
It might be better to speak from the podium.
I'm going to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, and as I said, I'm program manager for the, Programs and Facilities Manager for the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. We're a national estuary program, which means a lot of our funding has come from United States Environmental Protection Agency. And there's a group of us. Our offices are in the... I thought I got that off there. But our mission is to restore Delaware's estuaries and the watershed. So, and I'm also here as part of the Delaware Living Shorelines Committee, which is is a DENREC, Center for Inland Bays, and other organization partnership. And we are promoting the use of inland bays, of living shorelines in the inland bays. And there is an Inland Bays Shoreline Initiative, and we are looking to, again, to promote the use of living shorelines, and we're doing that through partnerships, outreach, demonstration projects is what I'm mainly involved in, and then research, monitoring, advocacy. These are the ecological benefits of a living shoreline. And what is a living shoreline? A living shoreline is a shoreline restoration effort that uses natural or nature-based techniques and tactics. We want to try to mimic natural processes to protect our shoreline. Again, some of the benefits, a hardened shoreline, which is rock or bulkhead or those types of things, they alter and degrade natural areas, whereas living shorelines tend to enhance and retain natural subtitle to upland transition, and I'll show you a slide of that in a second. But there are biodiversity benefits, and in a living shoreline, and so moving along. So these are, again, if your retaining wall up there, what's happening is you're going to make a barrier from water up into land, and that's very important to maintain that from a habitat standpoint. And when you have a bulkhead, what's going to happen is you're going to have the energy, the wave energy, hit that the wall or whatever, and it's going to send the energy right back. There's going to be erosion. There's going to be degradation to the habitat in the near shore area. You can also get erosion behind it. Whereas you can, the demonstration there is that there is that interface, so that a lot of those beneficial organisms can make that transition from water up into land. In the retaining wall type of situation, a lot of times what you'll get is a lawn right up to that area, and fertilizers, grass clippings, other things that can put nutrients into the water. So it has a number of benefits to it. And this is kind of a picture showing, some of the techniques that might be used in here, and I'm going to move on from there. But basically what you're looking to do is to make that, that transition as soft as, if you will, from water on into upland. Again, some of the benefits, we can repair, prevent erosion. We can address infrastructure that's already in place in some cases. Again, we're improving shoreline habitat. And in many cases, we'll actually create wetlands that are going to help resilience to sea level rise and storms in the future. With living shorelines, to install them, there's some things that you have to go through. Regulatory, and this is with pretty much any type of water project. You have to go through DENREC, you have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers. On the DENREC side, you need a wetlands permit. Typically, if it's something that's going to be out over the water, you're going to need to get a subaqueous land lease, and you have to pay for that on a recurring basis. And you have to get coastal management zone approval, which is basically a concurrence between state and federal to install living shorelines. You would need this for any type of in the water type of structure, whether it's a dock or a bulkhead or that type of thing. On the federal side, you have to go through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There's a thing called a nationwide permit, and that's kind of gives you it's kind of a pre-approval on certain types of projects. Nationwide Permit 54 specifically addresses living shorelines, although there's some others that we use on some of our projects. 13 is a shoreline restoration, 27 is a habitat. Section 408, sometimes we have to deal with that through the Corps of Engineers. And basically, we're working on a project on the Lewis Canal, which is federal property, so we need to do that. But the Corps assures that we're coordinating with other agencies like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Coast Guard, those type of things. There may be cost share, too. Through DENREC, in the 319 program, it's a reimbursement. So there's a lot of interaction between various regulatory agencies, and in certain cases, you can cost share.
You want questions at the end, or can we ask them along the way?
However you want to do it. You're the chairman.
If you don't mind, I would ask a few along the way here.
Okay.
Are you talking, there are residential ones as well, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So are these, do they have to go through all the same processes, and is there cost share on those?
There may be available, yes. Google Delaware Living Shorelines, it'll take you to the Living Shoreline Committee website, and there's links to all sorts of things, whether it's permitting, cost share, all these types of things. So the information's online.
So if somebody, for instance, here in Bethany happens to live on the wetlands and would like to do something out in front of their home, who happens to be on the wetlands, they would can they contact someone from Inland Bays?
They could certainly contact us from Inland Bays, and there's a number of other contacts on the website. So, yeah, we would definitely help try to guide them in the right direction.
You'd guide them through the process?
We won't we'll get them started.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so from here, I'm really, again, what I mainly do for the center and for Living Shorelines is I'm involved in the installation of them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what they are, show some pictures of some projects that we've done here. A couple of the design characteristics, considerations that we have, which would be a natural, which would be if we rebuilt a marsh and a beach down to the water or something like that, versus a hybrid where you get into an more of an energy situation. Water's moving a lot more wind, where you might use a type of structure to help with retaining that shoreline there. A great example of the energy, that's the next thing there is, living shorelines are not going to be appropriate in every place, that's for sure. And the best example I use is the beach, right out here. I mean, there's no living shoreline there. You have very few options. It's a high energy regime. As you can see, go out there on a day like today, and you'll see the sand. So they're not appropriate for every situation. That's for sure. Some of the things in there that we look at are the fetch, and that's the amount of the length of wind that's going to travel over the water before it gets to a beach or a shoreline. The longer the fetch, usually the higher the energy regime is on it. Current and tide are a big factor. I'm going to point out to the Bethany Loop Canal, particularly down where it connects into the other canal there. You've got some tough current there and a lot of erosion there. So, a plant-based living shoreline may not be appropriate for that area. Boat traffic is another energy factor. Get a lot of boats, especially if they're up on plane. The wakes will stir the water up, and it'll cause erosion. So you have to address those things, and you have to assess them as you're getting into the design of them.
Does the Center for the Inland Bays get involved with the actual design work, or is that an independent?
Typically, we don't.
So that would be an independent engineer?
Yeah, we for the projects that we do, we bring in a consultant. the one that we do most of the work with is he's a biologist, but there's a lot of engineering that goes to it, coastal engineers, even structural engineers. So, we work with the site with the landowner, or whoever that may be. We work with the consultant. We do a site assessment, and a lot of what we do is that we seek out grants and apply those toward a particular project, and then manage the project, depending on who our partners are on it. So,
What kind of time frame are you usually talking about from, initial look at a space to actual
yeah,
constructing?
a long time.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah.
What's a long time?
No, and a lot of it'll depend on, we do a lot of our work with grant work, so sometimes we'll have to wait on grant opportunities and develop grant opportunities, whether it's through, state, federal, private entities. That usually takes a good amount of time. The biggest time suck once you're moving on a project is the permitting, and particularly during COVID, the projects went in there and they were just slow. We had one over at Angola by the Bay. I'll show you some photos of that. The permitting was well over a year on it, and it just got caught in the quagmire, and they didn't. Denrec wasn't well staffed in that office, and it just took a long time. So, as they say with any project, the two hardest parts are getting started and getting finished, and sometimes that getting started on that permitting part can be trying. So some of the other characteristics on a site we look at: salinity. The projects that are right out on the bay, typically we're limited in what plants we can use if we're using plants in there. Sunlight is a factor. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Tidal range. If we're doing projects in Little Assawam Bay where the tidal swing is a foot or so, it's different from when we're doing projects that would be out on Indian River or closer to the where we have a couple of feet of tidal range. Soils, whether it's sandy or mucky or that kind of thing. Land use, neighboring land use. These are all things that we look at when we're trying to put together a living shoreline project. Some of the materials that we use, plants are a big part of it. We like to use plants as much as we can, the living shoreline part of it. Core logs are, I'll show you pictures of what a core log is, but it's basically a natural fiber material that we use. Timbers, that we, large pieces of tree that are installed in somewhat traditional manner, whether they're jetted in or you use you shake them in, those types of things. We use branches, tree trunks, and things that's typically in a lower energy regime. Shell bags are something that we like to use. The center has a oyster shell recycling program where we cooperate with a number of the restaurants in the watershed. We collect the shell, cure them, we'll put them in a plastic net bag and use those it's one of our basic building blocks. One of the benefits of those is that they'll attract aquatic life that will help build the living shoreline. Typically, ribbed mussels are what we're looking to get out there, but we will get oyster recruitment on it as well. Oyster castles, wads, reef balls. I'll show you some of the pictures of these, but they're They're man-made structures typically out of cement or other type of material like that. And they're used, I'll show you. And we do use rock a lot. You know, it's, again, mostly in some higher energy regimes. Moving on. So again, these are some of the materials. If you start in the upper left corner, logs that we used on a project at Angola by the Bay. And those were cut down, you know, several days before they were brought out into the site. These ones were actually, they were rough milled, so they had a square shape to them. They were kind of, made them a lot easier to work with in a certain way. On the top there, plants Spartina, or I guess now it's called the Sporobola is what the plant people are calling it now. On the top right is the Botanic Gardens, where we collected material mostly from the site and built a retention device there. Down in the lower corner there is, those are core logs. What it is, it's a coconut material that's shredded up and it's put in kind of a jute netting. They're very easy to work with. Problem with them is that they rot away very quickly. But it's, I'll show you some other pictures of that. And we've even dabbled into some soil amendments. In this picture, it's one of those few that you'll find where I'm actually working a tool there. But we're putting biochar into the soil there. And biochar is, it's a semi-burned material, much like a charcoal. And it helps with sequestering carbon, and there's a number of benefits, plant benefits with it. So this is really just a test site for it. But some of the other materials here that we used, there's a picture of the shell bag over there. And what we do with those after they've sat in our pile for a while, we have events where we get volunteers to stuff them into those bags. And that's really just a building block that we're going to be using on it. Over to the top that's an inverted root wad. Something very interesting and unique to the Botanic Gardens. But what it is those root wads were taken from the Botanic Garden site when they were clearing something. They washed the dirt off those. It's upside down, as you can probably tell, but what we're doing with it is putting plants into there, mainly vines, so that it gives kind of a 3D situation there, so that the plants can get up there. A lot of habitat benefit to it. Yep.
What type of plants do you use?
Use a lot of different kinds. For the more salty stuff that we're using, the grasses are Spartinas, which is Spartina alterniflora, cordgrass. Where it gets up a little bit higher into the uplands, kind of in the transition zone there, we'll use the Spartina patens. Again, the salinity of the water has a lot to do with it. If there's not a lot of our typical landscape materials that'll withstand a lot of salt. If it's more of a freshwater, which would be further up in the bays, that we'll use different types of plants like that. But most everything that we have to use is going to have to be somewhat salt tolerant. So much like my yard, which gets flooded all the time. So a couple of the other materials, and getting more into the hybrid materials here. These Pink Floyd looking things there are that's called a wad, and that's it's a energy damping device. They're designed so that the water will move through those baffles in through there. It'll slow down the energy, so when the fetch is coming across a large section of bay, you'll reduce the energy, and any sediment that might be in the water will tend to drop off on the other side, and you'll get some accretion, hopefully building up beaches or marshes or wetlands or that kind of thing. And then down the bottom, this is what's known as an oyster castle. And those are, it's a cinder block looking device. The castle structure on it, if you will, that's there for, so that you can use them together and make designs like that. So and again, that's going to be in a higher energy regime where the waves will hit it and it'll drop the water out. A lot of times those two devices there are, what you'll do is you'll get a contractor that comes in and he'll buy the cement locally, and he has the forms for them, but we'll mix in concrete, in the concrete oyster shells or things like that, so that hopefully you're going to be building more of a shellfish population on those. So, yeah, a couple of the situations here. On the bottom picture there, you can see the shell bags going out into the bays with the wads out behind there. The top left-hand side, we also do things upland that will help on the shoreline. And really what that is we're trying to increase the width of the buffer going down to the water. And that's actually the core log on there really is it helps the mowers not to go down cut down too far into the buffer area. Mowers always tend to want to do that to get down there lower. So it's actually a wildflower mix. Can't really see, but on the other side of the higher grass there, that's where the bay is. That's over on Burton's Prong. The top left is over on Dewey Beach, and it's a retrofit project. I'll show you some more pictures of it, but you can see some of the things that we have there. There was a lot of rock, so instead of hauling the rock out of there, we reused it in this project. And one thing that's interesting, if you look in through here, this is what we call a braided reef, and that's an offshore structure, and it's to dampen the energy coming in there, and that's made out of mainly the oyster shell bags, but also there's the oyster castles in there, and that helps to hold those oyster bags in place.
Are those projects that you've, is that a completed project that you've done? Was that for Dewey, the town of Dewey?
Yes. Mhm. And these are the living shoreline projects that we've worked on. A couple here in town, Lake Bethany and Loop Canal were the two first ones that we did. Then we went down to, after that we did Reed Avenue, and then Sassafras Landing down in Little Assawoman Bay. The Botanic Gardens, which is on Pepper Creek out near Dagsboro. We just finished a project at Angola by the Bay. Excuse me. And then we have a couple of exciting projects coming up. Thompson Island, which is on the backside of Dewey Beach, and a large project that our partners are Division of Parks and Rec on that. And then Sunset Park and Dewey Beach, which we're really just getting started on. So I'll go through this. And this is the first one, and Cliff, I know you remember this project here. And this is on Lake Bethany, and there's a strapping young guy there working on it. Again, I'm not sure, I think this might be on the agenda, Lake Bethany, but it's, we use core logs there to try to stop the erosion there and give an area between the core log and the eroding bank. Hopefully you would get some accretion in through there, plants would grow, and it would preserve the shoreline. That was kind of what we were hoping to see. That would have been a transition. But at the end of the day, the project really wasn't that successful, and a couple of reasons that we learned on it. Number one, the core logs just don't last long enough. They're in there, they'll rot away. The grass, whatever you're putting in there, really has to take off. Really has to grow well for a project like this to work. And Spartina, which is what that grass is there, it likes full sun. And then you have the branches there. So it's just, it really didn't work on there. And I know there's more work going to be done out there pretty soon. I'm not going to steal your thunder on that. So the next project that we did, and this is, actually I was working on the other one as a volunteer. This is when I came in for the center. And this is the loop canal. The center calls it. Steve, they called it the land strip. And you can see over in the top left-hand corner, that's the Villas of Bethany West. And this is the loop canal, and the rest of it is salt pond. A couple of the tactics that we're using here, these are timbers that they've been placed in the water, and the idea is that your primary fetch that you're going to have is going to be coming up this way from the north, and it'll slow the energy down, and then on the land strip, there are cells built in there, and the idea, there's logs and there's also shell bags to help make those cells. And the idea is that the energy is going to slow down, and then any sediment that's going to drop out of the water column will drop out there. This is it right after we completed it the first time. I don't think anybody really, when I came aboard this was really my first project on it. We really didn't realize the energy regime on there. The first year we lost a lot of this and had to go back out and redo it. And then the anchoring devices are a lot different. We went from a 2x2 hardwood stake to a 4x6 untreated log that was jetted in on an angle. But still, you can kind of see where the up top, the energy is in the waves, and as you get on the other side, it tends to slow it down. So that's kind of the idea that we're looking for, and we're hoping that the energy in the water that keeps any sediment suspended will be dissipated, and you're going to drop it over on the other side. And that's just a construction picture. We had Division of Fish and Wildlife, the mosquito control, they have all that big, nice machinery, and they helped us do that project. Now we're back to Dewey Beach, and this is Reed Ave. And Reed Ave was part of a larger resiliency study that the town of Dewey Beach, the Center for Inland Bays did, and this was really just one small section of it, the bottom of Reed Avenue. Where those cars are parked over there, if you get a lot of rain, it'll wash right down Reed Avenue and sit in that area. So, the rainwater flooding that you get is a big problem. But also, the other side, when you're getting the tidal flooding from nor'easters, things like that. So what we look to do is to make an elevated area. And this is a dune in through here. And it's about 3 feet above NAVD 88, so that there's a separation between the two. But over in this area here, there's a vault with tidal gauges on it. So if you get a big rainstorm, The water goes down into that vault and stays there until the tide goes down. And you can see right in here, you can see the gates for the tidal valves. So your water will run out, but if you're getting a storm surge, those will close, and the water will back up into the salt marsh that we're building there. So you may get a lag on either side of them, but it does give you basically a 3-foot dike, if you will, to address tidal flooding here. So that I always have to point the picture out. This is early April of 2020, right after the lockdown, and my daughter, who was sent back from Ireland studying abroad and then University of Delaware, that was the only time she would do a project like this because she wanted to get out of the house so bad. So, but there it is, and that's the big excavator there is installing that vault in there. So that's a big part of the project there. Kind of a neat thing that we used, those square bags in there are Herco barriers, something like that. It's actually, they were used in the Gulf Wars as a military application where they would send those to various places. You could fill that with whatever you had, and it makes a vehicle-proof barrier. And they were looking for some uses for it, non-military, and that we used as the spine, if you will, of the dune. And it was really worked well, filling those in. Got a little water, it compacted them, you could go back and fill them. It really gave a nice barrier there to the project. And that's the vault in there, and the tide valves go just on this side of it. That was during installation. And there are the tide valves there. Notice the shell bags going around the outside there. And reason for that is we're trying to encourage shellfish growth there. We prefer ribbed mussels, but oysters will grow in there. Again, same picture. We're on to Sassafras Landing, and this is over in the Assawoman area, Assawoman Wildlife Area. Many people refer to it as Camp Barnes. You can see the parking lot for it over there. And on the right-hand side is Little Assawoman Bay, Miller Creek. On the left side is 35-acre pond, which is a freshwater impoundment, mainly for waterfowl habitat, and it was washing away. There had been trees in there. They had washed away. You can see where the stone is, and that was an attempt to stop some of the rill erosion in there. So what we did, we partnered with Division of Fish and Wildlife. They provided the material and the equipment to install it, and we, the center, through our grantors, got the engineers on board, designed it, and we helped do a number of the volunteer parts of it. So again, you look on the top side there, that's it's a freshwater impoundment. When I say freshwater, it's not mountain spring water by any circumstance. But what we did was we put those rocks there, and you can see there's the gaps there. That allows wildlife to get in and out of the water into the land, and then we used fill. So what we did was we just, we increased the area and planted it to hold it in place. So that's after we installed all the sand to the project there. And that's during our planting day. We mobilized, I think it was 40 people, and we planted that entire area in less than a morning. And that's what kind of the finished result there. And again, what we're looking for is, the plants to basically buffer the energy and the water out there. That location, it's a little bit over a mile fetch if you come directly from the east, which is one of, when you get a bad storm, one of the ways that you'll get it. So there's a good amount of fetch in there. We had looked at using timbers, core logs, something like that on the toe to start it, but the energy was just too much. So we brought the rock in and then brought the sand in. And that's the finished product right there. We created, a little over a half an acre of wetlands while we were at it. So that's the project. The fall after we installed the project, we had a couple of big storms, and some that overtopped it. And this was a drone picture of that storm. And you can see the water in there up over toward the left side. The plants did their job. They held the soil in place, and despite all of this water and the heavy tidal action that was, rushing over it, we didn't get much real erosion. We were just, it stayed in place well. All right, now we're on to the Delaware Botanic Gardens, which in a way is our sexiest project. The Botanic Gardens has been a great partner of ours. So what we did, we designed this project here. It's upstream, almost at the headwaters of Pepper Creek. Low energy, so there's not a lot of wind activity in there. Some boat activity. Water's not very salty, so with planting we could do a couple of different things. But the aesthetics were a big part of this project. We didn't want the rock. The property owner didn't want the rock, but we wanted to preserve this area. And there was quite a bit of erosion on it, so we addressed the erosion problems on it. And that's what a big part of it is. This is what we call the anchor branch toe. And all of that material was there on site. And I say we, mainly Sam Cashdollar from the Botanic Gardens, collected it, stored it, processed it, sized it. And what we did to build it was, you can see where there's kind of a inverted V there. The horizontal log in the back, we jetted straight down. Ran a stringer between those, and then we had a log at a 45-degree angle also jetted down. By jetted down, I mean we took an irrigation hose and put it right next to the log, pushed it down in the water, and jammed it down. It's a fairly common method of doing that type of thing. Then we took all these other logs and packed them in there, and the idea being is that there's a lot of sediment in that water. You can kind of see it in that picture. And as it rushes over at high tide into the grasses there, it'll drop out of the water and actually build up that marsh edge. We also did other parts of the project here too. This was where really moving into upland, it was severely eroding. So we built this, we called this a bird's nest revetment. If you've been to the Botanic Gardens, you see the bird's nests that they have around there. It's really the same principle on this. But one of the things that we did on it, we really wanted to avoid too much man-made material on it. So we were getting some erosion of the sand and dirt through that wood there. Sam, who is one of the most ingenious people I've ever met, he was pulling out a bunch of greenbrier from somewhere else. He stuffed it down in there, and that took care of the erosion problem on it. So there are the inverted root wads. We had not planted at that point, but basically we're using native honeysuckles and trumpet vines in through there. And because that water's not real salty, we can get away with using that. If we were trying to do that over at, say, the salt pond, the plants wouldn't make it. So that adds like a three-dimensional aspect to it. The plantings look nice, part of the aesthetics, but it also builds the plant material in that area there, so makes it a little bit more resilient to flooding. We also, there were some areas of scour and such on the side, so we planted some spartina in there. All right. So moving on, this is Angola by the Bay, and we just finished this up. It's a neighborhood over off of Route 24. Technically, they call it Lewis. I call it Route 24. This is Burton's Creek. The project involved a management document for approximately 2,200 feet of shoreline there, low energy, houses not right on there, but a lot of recreation uses. You can see the kayaks and other paddlecraft, and there's a marina up on the other end there. So even though the shoreline that we addressed is over 2,200 feet, it's really about 500 linear feet of shoreline that we addressed in here. This was the worst part. This was erosion, and this was on our site visit as we got started. You can see the trees were there, so at some time that had been upland, and it just eroded away. The homeowners in the background had already addressed the Phragmites, so we didn't need to do anything there. It was really right in this area that we started the project. And it's right there by the marina, and that's, you see the stumps over in that area. So what we did was we put a timber log on the outside with untreated 4x4s. We bolted into it. There's a core log on the other, and that's our toe, and that holds the soil in place. That area there is where we brought in the biochar. You can kind of see over in this area where it's off color. That's from the charcoal that's in there. But that's planted in grass. And then there's some other things in there. What else did we do in there? Other places we did, this is another area here. We're getting erosion in that bend. So we put that structure in there. Again, a timber on the outside, core log on the inside. And we're counting on the sediment to drop out in that area. There had been stone on the project before. In this area, we were getting erosion between the stone and the bank. And so we put in those core logs in those areas. And again, it's a cell, and the idea is that we're going to collect the sediment and it's going to build it up. And we did a good amount of planting on it, and this was just last March we did this. And then finally, Thompson Island. Oh, wait, this is not finally, but this is Thompson Island. It's north end of Rehoboth Bay. One of the state's most important archaeological sites. It was a paleo-indigenous burial ground, approximately dates back to about 10,000 years. Pre-Nanticoke, I'm told. It's part of the Thompson Island Preserve. Humans are not allowed out there, so we're looking to address a couple things on it. This is the bank that faces south, and as you can see, it's quite a bluff in there. but there, quite a bit of erosion. But we're also looking to put in some structures that would prevent boats from getting into this, onto the island. So it's going to be a big project. We have just submitted our permits on it, but we're going to divide it into several sections. The southern shoreline is the highest energy. It's, I believe it's 6 miles of fetch going up toward Indian River. So it's, you get some severe waves and some severe erosion over in there. Over on the eastern shoreline, still a lot of energy, but not as high. Both of those areas will incorporate offshore structures, whether they're going to be wads or other devices, oyster castles. We're not sure on that yet. This is going to be a state project, so it has to go out to bid, and they have to provide what they want as this specs on the material. The western shoreline is on the Lewis Canal, and even though there's a good amount of current through there, it's not a huge area of energy, and that'll basically be shell bags shoring up the edge on the Thompson Island side, and we anticipate doing that as a volunteer project with through the center. It's a pretty easy project. And then finally, this is Sunset Park and Dewey Beach, and we are really just getting going on this. We have several meetings. The town is interested in this project, and what we're looking to do, it's going to be a couple of phases to it. If you're familiar with the area, this itself is Sunset Park, and it's eroding, and there have been attempts to put some type of hard structure in there, and it didn't work. We're envisioning that over on that side will be a dune similar to what Reed Avenue looks like. Over from, this is Ivy, that there would be structures in through there that are wave attenuation devices that'll slow down the energy and hopefully build up sediment. Then over on this side, we're looking to secure these marsh edges. And this is a part of a bigger project where they're also addressing the floodwater, the rainwater that would be coming down from Route 1 down on Dagsworthy, and I forget what the other street is there. So, but again, this is just gotten started. We have some concept designs. I don't have it in here, but here you can see the erosion on there. There's a gazebo over there that's kind of off center now. It's they're going to repair that, so that's part of the project there. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, McKinley Street's the other one up there, but they're we're going to be addressing some of the stormwater features that are in there now, and then addressing the floodwater from the bay coming in there. So that's our concept right now, and right in early June, we're going to have our surveyors and such out there putting this all together and come up with the plan. So with that, those are all the pictures of my projects I have. So, and I'm happy to address any questions.
Okay, very interesting. I'll put it out for questions. Anyone in the audience have any questions, or from the committee? I have one.
Okay.
Cost-wise, the ones you're looking at Thompson Island and the ones you're looking at Sunset Park, do you have an estimate for, or approximate, range that they're expecting those to run?
Yeah, about 1.2 to 2 million on Thompson Island. And that's a large project. It's going to, it's going to be a state project that has to go through the Division of Facilities Management. There's a lot of moving parts to it. We'll probably be staging across the bay at, if you know where New Road is, off of Route 1. So there's a lot to it. That's going to be a pretty expensive one.
Do you have grant money for that, or is that still to be determined?
We have some. We have enough for the design and permitting, and we have some other. We are looking at, State Parks has a trust fund. Since it's a historic, archaeological site, the state's very interested in it. So right now, we did not get bond bill funding for it in the last go-around on it, and I'm not an expert on that part of it, but I understand that there is still an opportunity to get bond bill money for it this year, or if not this year, next year, for installation. Sunset Park, there's too many variables on it right now. The property over there, the town owns Sunset, the town of Dewey Beach owns Sunset Park. Alex Paris is a local businessman. He owns Ivy and leases North Beach, but the Dewey Beach Lions Club actually owns North Beach and that marsh over on the other side there. So we have not come to a conclusion on the exact design, what's going to be protected, what's not. So it's really too early to tell on that one.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
What about, the concrete pieces that you have that let some water through? Is that fairly recent stuff that you've been using, or?
Yeah. There's only one project in the bays so far that has it, and that's Seagrass Plantation, which is out near Cripple Creek. There's different sizes of them. Those are large ones. I believe those are 5-footers. There are also smaller ones that you can put out. There's a competing device called a reef ball, used in some other places, down off of Assateague and a couple places over in Chesapeake that I've seen them. But the idea is not new, is that you're using some type of device, or you're not putting a hard barrier, but you're trying to slow the water down. And you still have to, allow for fish and crabs and things like that to get through it.
Thank you, Bob.
All right.
Very, very interesting and very enlightening, so thank you. And please, we got a few more things to cover in the meeting. We'd love for you to remain, but, it's up to you. I know you've probably got a busy schedule.
As a resident, I am gonna.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the status and update of beach replenishment. I will pass that to Cliff.
Replenishment was supposed to begin in Rehoboth Beach in mid-March. It did not begin until really almost mid-May. And mid-May was when Bethany Beach was originally scheduled to have replenishment begin. Last week, the timetable for work to begin in Bethany Beach changed again. The week before, it was June 9th. Last week, it moved to between June 1st and June 6th. The week before, it was going to take 25 days to complete, and with last week's briefing, it was only going to take 19 days to complete. So it's an ongoing moving target. Right now, we do expect, unfortunately, that replenishment will stretch into July and possibly even July 4th. The issue for us there will be fireworks. We're hoping that some component of the dredge equipment is able to reestablish the area near Wellington, because it's going to come ashore near Campbell and move north and then move south. And if we can get to Wellington, we might be able to shoot fireworks from Wellington. We need at least 400 feet of beach. We prefer 400 feet as opposed to 300 feet. But it will be problematic because they close 1,000 feet of beach at a time as the project moves. We had been hopeful. We had heard a third dredge was going to be used in the project, and the project is moving from Rehoboth to Dewey with 2 dredges. We heard a third dredge would be utilized, and we're hopeful that the third dredge would be utilized south of the inlet. But unfortunately, the third dredge was sent to Fenwick Island, which is sort of startling to us, given the fact that our beach is probably the public beach south of Indian River Inlet. We looked into that. We've had conversations with the Corps, with DENREC, and our congressional delegation, and the contract was let with Weeks Marine, the company doing the dredging, that allowed the dredging company to set the schedule for the dredging, the schedule of who gets dredged when and replenished when. And any change to that would result in some sort of substantial increase of cost to both the federal government and the state of Delaware, and no change was made with that. The dredging from the third dredge is supposed to move from Fenwick to South Bethany, and I'm not sure if it's then supposed to join the 2 dredges in Bethany. But as a side note, the dredge landed, I guess, last Monday in Fenwick and broke down within a couple of days of work in Fenwick. So a moving target guided by weather and equipment, and I'm afraid we'll probably end up with something getting to Bethany second week in June, and probably taking us into sometime into July. So again, it's been very interesting to date. So
Yeah. Certainly has been. And I guess we'll see it when we see it, but hopefully we get some sunny weather and some dredges that don't break down.
it's the gift horse in whose mouth you cannot look. So, I mean, we just
Yes.
have to be appreciative of it. So, yes.
Okay.
So, if they don't do it, what happens to the fireworks? We postpone them till some other time, or?
I don't know. I think that'll probably be an issue for the council. And one of the issues that we'll have is with the contractor, because at a certain point in time, they'll want X amount of the contract to mobilize and shoot the fireworks.
Exciting.
Can the location be shifted for the fireworks, or is it?
Do them in Fenwick, right?
No, I meant, if they get the north end of town,
Well,
maybe Ocean View Parkway.
Because of Wellington and Ocean View Parkway are the only areas with the larger lots.
Yep.
And so there's a certain amount of space that needs to be between the where the fireworks are shot and the nearest house.
Yep.
So Ocean View and Wellington lend themselves to us being able to use a fairly large shell. We're not often able to use a 4-inch shell, which requires about 400 feet of beach, but that presents a much nicer show, a much more attractive, entertaining show. And we were hoping to have the beach replenishment, have that 400 feet somewhere, Wellington or Ocean View Parkway, to be able to use the 4-inch shells.
Okay. Thank you, Cliff. Any questions or comments? Moving on, the Loop Canal and Bladder Dam, Assawoman Canal, Bladder Dam status?
So we used a LiDAR component to put a finer point on potential impacts, if any, of the dam and its use. And the dam, for anyone that's not familiar with it, the initiative here, the interest here is creating probably a dam that will be operated hydraulically or with an inflatable bladder, but a steel dam that will rise to about 3 feet in height. And that dam effectively would take care of about 90% of our tidal flooding. It wouldn't take care of major events, wouldn't be able to deal with them, and would overtop at 3 feet, but would have a substantial impact on our flooding. And that dam would be located at the confluence of the Assawoman and the Loop Canal. And initially, it was thought the dam was going to have to be almost as wide as the canal, but as design has gone on and work has gone on, the dam itself will not be as wide and will cost substantially less than what we initially had planned or thought it would cost. The issue we have now, again, in putting a finer point on potential impacts, is what happens when the dam's erected to water that's in the Assawoman. We've taken care of most of our concerns about Ocean View, but in doing that, we've discovered a little bit of a push in Bethany Beach, south of Route 26, along the canal bank on the east side of the road, almost adjacent, a little bit north of Turtle Walk, between Turtle Walk and Route 1. There's a significant low area there that we're talking to State Parks, who owns the strips on both sides of the Assawoman, about potentially being able to do something to prohibit that push-in of water from the Assawoman if the dam is erected. So we're looking at that, trying to put a finer point on all those things before we proceed to the next step. So that's where we are with that.
Any questions? Do you mind stepping up to the podium so that they can hear you?
If the dam's not as wide as the canal, how does it stop the water?
It'll have a structure on both sides of it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so, but the opening will still be large enough, be navigable, but the structure on both sides of the dam would act to prohibit water from flowing in. So.
Okay, but what about Fresh Pond? Because that feeds into the salt pond. Are they doing anything there?
We've looked at that, we've studied it for years, and it's almost counterintuitive. We thought when we began this whole process of reviewing where floodwaters come from that affect Bethany Beach, that we would see more of an impact from the Fred Hudson area over Fresh Pond into the salt pond. At the end of the day, that's not the case. The vast majority of our floodwater pushes in from the Assawoman into the Loop Canal. Bob mentioned the strength of that tide. When it pushes in from the Assawoman, it's substantial. And we'll talk about the Lake Bethany land strip in a little bit. But that force of the water is what's eroding the Loop Canal right now. So minimal issue north of town. And any problem we do have, we think can be taken care of with gates near Cotton Patch Hills, in the path at Cotton Patch Hills, where there's a little bit of an overpass and 2 large drainage pipes installed. We think simple gates there would take care of any flow in from the north.
Okay.
Bob?
And just to be clear, I'm asking as resident, not as, because this is, not what I'm doing. On that there, is the permitting part of, for those gates out there by Cotton Patch Hills, is that going to be part of the project, putting those gates and getting all of that permitted as well?
Oh, obviously, everything will need to be permitted, and we're not there yet.
But it's part of the project?
It would have to be part of the project.
And then you mentioned this project's not going to take care of all the flooding that we have. Do you have a height elevation estimation?
Well, as I said, it would take care of probably 90% plus of our inundating, rainy day, sunny day nuisance flooding.
Yeah.
What it's not going to take care of is a direct hit from a Sandy. The 98 storm, if you remember, you lived here then.
I remember it.
Okay. It's not going to take care of those storms, but the majority of the flooding we see in our community and our swales and our ditches will be taken care of with this dam, it's our belief. So.
Yeah, and I think my yard, which is one of the lowest in town, I think, but it's, I judge it off the Fred Hudson tide gauge. 3 feet is basically when we start seeing the flooding. Do you have an idea as far as when we would see it? Or I'm assuming it would overtop the dam that we would talk.
Well, 3 feet at Fred Hudson is different, and I would suggest if you don't do it, that you use the tidal gauge that we have on our website for the Loop Canal itself.
Okay,
And 3 feet, again, takes care of, again, 90+% of our flooding in
yeah,
town. Would be a heck of an impact for you where you live, so.
and again, I'm, you know, to judge it, that's all.
And if you haven't looked at it, Bob, on the website, if you click on the weather icon at the top of the page and you can go to Tide Real Time, it takes you to our tidal gauge, which is right here at Route 1 at the loop.
Okay,
And you can then scroll down, you'll see a map of the town. You can plug in, if it says 1.9, you plug in 1.9, and you can tell just what portion of the town is flooded at that point in time.
all right.
So it's a great tool if you're, especially if you don't live in the area and you want to see what's going on in town.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure.
So it'll basically protect all those areas, you know, Lake Bethany, everything north of 26, out Tingle, the villas, Bethany West, and then down here, Wygan and Gibson, and then over, of course, down Pennsylvania, which is the one that's the most visible to most people. Any other questions? Moving on, the next thing we have on the agenda is the Back Bay study. And there was a charrette sponsored by Denarec and the Corps of Engineers back in April, which was a preliminary meeting of municipalities. Do you want to
Sure.
elaborate on that a little bit?
The Back Bay study, as we call it, after Hurricane Sandy, the federal government allocated a large sum of money to 11 different districts running from Norfolk up to Baltimore and up to Connecticut. Delaware was recognized as one, New Jersey as one, the areas that were flooded in New York State along Long Island were another one of those areas. And these studies have been going on now for a number of years. For one reason or another, Delaware did not decide to participate in these studies, which requires a cost match of about initially $1.5 million from Delaware to match the $1.5 million from the federal government. Delaware somehow was able to get the cost of this work down, diminished the scope of the project and got the cost down to $2 million, and then finally agreed to participate in it. The projects recognized in New Jersey were major projects, and some of them were actually gating some of the inland waterways on the barrier islands. So they were major projects, and that's the type of thing that the Corps was generally looking at with these sorts of projects for their Back Bay study. So the Corps comes in, conducts a study, they look at what can be done, what can have a major impact on Back Bay flooding, and they go to work and they design some of these projects, and they become, for want of a better word, shovel-ready. In the case of another tragic storm like Sandy, when the federal coffers open up and these projects have been approved, then the Corps is able to move ahead very quickly and implement some of these projects because they are already permitted and ready to go. Again, Delaware resisted doing that, but again has agreed to participate. One of the things that people have suggested is that we look at using this or trying to take our bladder dam and make this something that the Corps might be interested in. But one of the negatives there for us is we don't know if the Corps would be interested because they are looking at projects that are more forest and not trees, and something specific to Bethany Beach might be more of a tree than a forest to them. And also, the projects have a 3-year span from when they're first designed, first implement, when they begin the scope of the study to when they can finally complete design is a 3-year step. And that's listed in the handout that was given at the charrette to everyone. So I've heard some people say that it's 2 years and it's 1.5 years, and yes, they're looking at smaller projects, and yes, they're doing this, and yes, they're doing that, but that's not according to the Corps. 3-year span of time, major projects, and ours might not be one of those they would consider. We're also hopeful that we're able to move ahead with what we're doing long before 3 years is over, so.
Yeah, when they look at it, they have to look at, they're not protecting just Bethany Beach, but you got Rehoboth, you got Dewey all the way down to the Maryland line. So
Well,
they're going to look equally or at least somewhat equally at the overall picture.
they had working groups, and they had divided their meeting into various working groups. And our working group proposed that they consider doing something. Again, they've done massive levees along the Gulf. Their proposals in Jersey are significant proposals, some of them. And we suggested that if they wanted to do something that would impact all three Back Bay communities south of the inlet, they look at gates at Whites Creek and a gate at Assawoman on Route 54 as something potentially that would actually prohibit Back Bay flooding in these areas, because the push is in from Whites Creek and then the push is into Assawoman, into the Little Assawoman and into our area. So this was just, the meeting was an idea for stakeholders to get together, offer up possible solutions and ideas and thoughts they had. The Corps takes this back from the charrette, digests it, puts something out, and goes on to their next steps.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. A lot of things going on there. Any questions? Next item on the list is Sea Grant. That's an economic study of the contribution of the coast, the Delaware coast, on the economy of the entire state of Delaware. And I believe that's still in the works, with being the initial part of the plan being put together by the end of May or early into June. So do you have any more to add on that one?
In 2012, the University of Delaware and Sea Grant put together an economic study that totaled the impact of coastal industry, and that would be everything that you could think of that's been generated because of the beach, boardwalks, the bays, from construction to the restaurant business, on and on. And they came up with a tag of about $6.9 billion in fiscal impact in state, local, and federal taxes that are generated by coastal industry, which probably, in today's dollars, probably rivals or surpasses what's passed as Delaware's largest industry, which is agriculture. So the Association of Coastal Towns, which are coastal towns from Lewis to Fenwick, came together and funded an updated study that we're looking for a newer number and a better number, which I'm hoping is closer to the $9 billion mark, which then would surpass agriculture. The importance of that is we can use that, the coastal communities can use that as they lobby at both the state and federal level for things like replenishment, the continuing nurturing of our bays, our water channels, and so on and so forth. So,
Great, thank you. And that's, that's through Sea Grant, but it's the state of Delaware or the University of Delaware are the contributants that are putting the content and the basis for that study together. The next item on our agenda is the Loop Canal bulkhead, living shoreline, and dredging projects, which are shut down right now until the fall. But
So Bob was so right that the two toughest things in any project are beginning it and completing it. We have just finished one of the initial stages of permitting. Staff met with both the Corps and DENRIC here in the last week or so for that first initial stage of the joint permitting process. The state prefers that jurisdictions who are making these types of applications or individuals don't go with hard structures. They prefer things like the living shorelines or, at the very least, riprap. That's problematic for us with the land strip because of the steepness of the bank and because of the flow of the tidal waters in and out, and the fact that much of the silting in the Loop Canal itself has come from the land strip on Lake Bethany.
Can I just clarify, the land strip, you're talking about the Lake Bethany landscape?
Yes, the Lake Bethany land strip,
Not the Salt Pond land?
not the Saw Pond land strip.
Just
Okay,
clarify.
yes, okay. And so we have permits underway. One is for the consideration of a hard structure. The Corps and DENRIC want our engineers to come back and thoroughly convinced them that that's probably the only suitable way to maintain that bank. And at the same time, on the south side of the Lake Bethany land strip, we would go back to looking to construct some sort of a living shoreline, probably with some of the applications you've showed us today. So you mentioned, and it's certainly true, that the permitting process with DENREC et al. Takes a substantial amount of time. We had hoped to have something underway where we might have some plans in hand by the fall, but everything now is dependent on our second step with both the Corps and DENREC on what type of structure we may use on the north side of the land strip to maintain that wall. The problem with riprap, the land strip is losing its width, and if we riprap, we'll take away even more of that land strip in order to riprap it. We'll put stone into the canal, and we'll probably take about half of that land in order to create a riprap bank that would sustain what's left. And our hope is not to do that. I mean, it's an important piece of it's a heron estuary and an important piece of protection for the lake and Lake Bethany. So.
Or you think it's some other kind of bulkhead rather than riprap?
Well, we're hoping for a bulkhead. If you look at the canal in that entire area, there's bulkhead up and down all the shores there. But I think you have to answer that question to DENREC and the Corps' satisfaction before they'll consider letting you do that.
Okay. So time frame is hopefully in the off season before next summer?
That would be ideal, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? I'm going to breeze over this next one pretty quick because do you have anything to add on that?
No, we have not met from a planning and zoning perspective for the last few months, and the comprehensive plan is being reviewed by the public this week. So we don't have anything to share out on some of these future initiatives.
Okay. Just for those who may not be aware, there is a public hearing on Friday at 2 o'clock in this room to discuss the comprehensive plan. And it's formulated now, and will be, we're looking to get it approved here shortly. But that meeting is a public hearing for any comments from the public. So please come. The next two together, we are working on some items, or a pamphlet in particular, to put together for making an awareness, putting out an awareness of what the public can do, landowners and property owners and homeowners can do on their property to assist the town, assist the area in addressing flooding and pollution and so on. And there is a lot that can be done. If you go on the website, there is a best practices listed on there now, which you can review. We are kind of putting a bullet form one, because one that is not quite so voluminous, together in a pamphlet, and then a pictorial of things that individual property owners can do, and that can help the town and help us all. So something that's in the works. That should be out. I'm waiting for a proposal right now on that, and then I'll be coming to you, Cliff, to get that approved and on the way. 14 on the list is, many of you may have tuned in on Monday night, the Del Dot Route 1 initiative for coastal resiliency of Route 1. Very interesting. This was their second meeting, and it is progressing. There again, it's not a tomorrow type thing. As they said in the meeting, they probably won't see equipment out there until about 5 years from now. But if you did not see it on on Monday. You can go on the DelDOT site. I believe it's del.gov, Route 1 Coastal Resiliency, and you can play it. 15 on our list is just research on what's going on. There's been a lot of articles in Coastal Point and a number of papers lately that many of you probably have seen. Of course, replenishment is, as Cliff was saying, changes from day to day, week to week, but that's been publicized in the papers. I believe Sea Grant, I think I saw something on that, and Back Bay as well, and the Route 1 resiliency, of course, was just on the Zoom. Does anybody from the committee have something, please?
Item 10 was a two-parter, and I only did one. So, may I?
Oh, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
So it was update on the Loop Canal bulkhead and then living shoreline and dredging. The town had hoped to be able to piggyback off of some of the efforts and initiatives that are ongoing in the Asswoman and White's Creek, and maybe realize some synergy in terms of cost savings if we could bring in the same contractors and engineers to give us some guidance on possibly dredging the Loop Canal. To that end, we've done a bathymetric study of the entire loop, and we have data. We're talking to our engineers about giving us something that is accessible in terms of being able to read that data, and if we get that, we'll put that bathymetric study on our website for everyone to look at. But it just basically tells us what we know is that the Loop Canal is very, very shallow and barely navigable at all in many areas and/or on low tide. So we are having discussions with our engineers about the possibility of dredging. We're looking at some cost estimates. Right now, we have a really rough estimate that the cost to dredge the loop would be in the neighborhood of $1.9 million. The negative for us there, as we all know from our experience with the Asswoman, that it wasn't but a few years after the Asswoman was last dredged that it silted over again. So the Bethany Loop Canal has never been redredged since its first dredging in 19-something. This would be something that we hope we might be able to get to. And we have not had discussions with our engineers about their thoughts about silting, what the push-in from the Asswoman, which pushes in from the Indian River Bay, might mean in terms of that silting, and what kind of lasting impact we might have if we dredge the canal. All that being said, we are exploring different avenues for funding for that type of a project, and we're hopeful we might find some which would make the project more appealing to the town as it moves forward.
Is it a possibility to take the dredging material and widen the Loop Canal that's coming out?
Yes. So one of the things we had hoped was that we would be able to use the same spoil site that the state was using because of the potential cost savings. And the state's very particular about what they allow you to do with the spoils. Because of timing and because of the fact that the White's Creek project has been pushed back, the White's Creek spoils will now join the Asswoman spoils and go to a site somewhere down on the Asswoman, Little Asswoman. That will not be available then to us. But we're talking to the engineers about possibly looking at that land spit, which is your hobby, I know. So, and also the National Guard has a real interest in reclaiming some of what they have lost on the west side of their camp. So they have an engineer on their staff, environmental engineer, who's having conversations with our engineers about those two potential sites. But there are a lot of variables on this, and we're just at the very beginning of looking at it.
There is a narrow path there that it's barely navigable. I mean, you can go out
Yes.
on the high tide, but we're stuck. We
So
can't come back.
we had also taken a look at just possibility of spot dredging spots, it's just,
Right,
just
right.
but it's almost foolish because the cost difference is negligible by the time you mobilize the dredges. So to bring them in and just do spots with the idea that you're going to save dollars, it was only a few $100,000 difference between spot dredging some of our really bad spots and doing the whole canal,
Would
so.
it be possible to use an excavator like we did before in the section on the, behind Bethany surf shop there?
That's beyond my pay grade, so I don't know, so.
Because,
I don't know.
you know, there's maybe 50 feet that needs to be dredged, and
Well, it's bad right there, but there are other spots just equally,
Right. but we can't, we cannot count on that for this year, right?
no,
Okay.
no.
We could raise your pay grade.
Well,
Go
the only
for
thing we would have to do is get it permitted, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to realize all that has to go through DENREC. You have to get DENREC approval for anything you're doing, so. And I'm not sure, does the Corps get involved with that?
I don't know if the Corps would or not. I'm
But
not
DENREC
sure.
anyway.
We might have to take a shovel and do it ourselves. Basically, I mean, seriously.
Okay, any other questions? I don't believe, do we have any new business? Then, if that's the case, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Got a motion?
Second?
Second? Vote? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Hard at it.